The elementary school that I attended, that if you keep going down Princeton, you'll get pretty close to it, Lake Silver, has a fence around it, and they're getting ready to demolish it and rebuild it, a new building. They've already done this to my high school. Noah and I were riding bikes over there, and he said, "Where were your classes?" I said, "Oh, where that retention pond is over there." The sidewalk that I wrote my name in as a senior is long gone. Anyone else know what I'm talking about? Anyone else have this experience? The fraternity house that I lived in Tallahassee is completely gone. Yeah, there is a message. It undermines our sense of permanence, doesn't it? That illusion that we like to hold on to. Makes us feel we're getting a little bit older, time is passing, things are changing, we have less time. And it's very ironic that as Jesus and the disciples are leaving the temple courtyard for the last time for Jesus, he's going to be back in Jerusalem, but not there. He's only got a few days left. He's running out of time. That they would then turn around and point towards the buildings of the temple, these great massive stones, and say, "Wow, look at that, Jesus. Look at those buildings. Aren't they massive? Aren't they permanent? Aren't they always going to be there forever?" And Jesus had a shock for them. This is verses 1 through 3. Claudia is going to read for us.
Jesus left the temple and was walking away when his disciples came up to him to call his attention to its buildings. "Do you see all these things?" he asked. "I tell you the truth, not one stone here will be left on another. Every one will be thrown down." As Jesus was sitting on the Mount of Olives, his disciples came to him privately. "Tell us," they said, "when will this happen? And what will be the sign of your coming and of the end of the age?"
So credit the disciples for believing Jesus here, but then they have some questions, of course. They want to know when. Don't we always want to know when? That's some information people are always interested in. How long is this going to take? When can I leave? I've been going, I've visited a couple people in the hospital recently, and that's everyone who walks in the door, that's what they ask. How long? How much longer am I here for? When can I get out of here, right, Don? When can I leave? How long? And we don't like that, because in the hospital you're told, and you don't know. And they say, maybe tomorrow. Jesus doesn't answer that question, the when. How long do we have? When's it going to happen? In fact, he says in Matthew 24:36, "But as for that day and hour, nobody knows it. Neither the angels of heaven nor the Son, no one but the Father alone." No one knows when this is going to happen. Instead, what Jesus does is he teaches them, and this is where I'm going with this passage. If you read it this week, you maybe were wondering where we were going to go with this. Jesus instead says, he teaches how we should live with the time that we have. And it reminds me of one of the gold nuggets in the Lord of the Rings trilogy. In the movies, they did a good job with this. Frodo is in despair and says, "I wish I would have been born in a different generation. Why did this happen? Gandalf, why did this have to happen now? Why did this have to happen to me and my generation?" And Gandalf says, so do all everyone asks this who live in such times, but it is not for them to decide. All we have to decide is what to do with the time that has been given us. And of course, Billy Crystal joked. They showed that scene, and then at the Oscars, Billy Crystal goes, "Yeah, this from a guy who has a 9-hour movie." So Jesus' prediction about the temple, his prophecy was fulfilled. It was fulfilled even in, there's one verse that says this will happen in this generation. And it did. Within the disciples' generation, could be considered in that time range. Rome came in. Israel had rebelled against Rome's authority. And they came in and they completely destroyed the temple. They did not leave one massive block on top of another. And if you go to Israel today, you will find there is no temple there. Still, none has been built. There is a little bit of exposed foundation. And that is it. And many scholars, there's a lot on this passage, and there's a lot to argue about. And many scholars say the current ones are more after, Jesus is really talking about this event, this 70 AD Rome coming in and destroying the temple. That's what this is really about. And they say, he does say it's going to happen within the disciples' generation. The disciples probably believe that, when the temple goes down, the whole rest of it's going too. So it is the end of the world. It would be when Jesus would return as promised, and it would be the end of this age. And then there's the others that say, no, this is the rapture, and they point to that. And there's a lot of fascination there within the church in the rapture and in end times. And we saw it at Y2K. Remember, there was many people who believed that might be the end of times, clearly ignoring this passage that says we're not going to know. It's going to come like a thief in the night. It's not going to have anything to do with computers. And half the world doesn't follow that calendar anyway, so what are you doing? And etc. So they ignored this passage. I think when we get stuck on that other stuff, we do ignore what the main point is. And that's what Jesus is going to teach us. He's going to teach us what to do with the time that we have, because the world is going to come to an end. I was at the Science Center not that long ago and reading about the ages of the dinosaurs and how massive just wipeouts of living beings would happen every so often. And then you go, so that's the dinosaurs, and then you go over and then you see that our universe is on its way to colliding with other universes. It's going to happen at some point. Science agrees. The world will come to an end. So we have a choice. We have a choice. Are we going to believe that it is all random? It's all random. And so we push aside this feeling of meaninglessness and emptiness in our life, and we just go for what we can get today. We go after our selfish desires. That's one way to go with this information. Or you say, no, there is a creator who is in control, who has a kingdom, who has sent his son so that we can enter into his kingdom. And I am going to serve him with the time that I have left. So that's our choice. And if we've chosen to serve him, then we're going to follow the son's instructions. These instructions in his last days to the disciples. Here's how you should live while I'm gone. How to live in this moment. This is 4 through 8.
Jesus answered, "Watch out that no one deceives you, for many will come in my name claiming, 'I am the Christ,' and will deceive many. You will hear of wars and rumors of wars, but see to it that you are not alarmed. Such things must happen, but the end is still to come. Nation will rise against nation, and kingdom against kingdom. There will be famines and earthquakes in various places. All these are the beginning of birth pains."
What we're going to do is look at, in the Greek, there's imperative verbs. There's verbs that are marked as commands that stand out. It's kind of like an exclamation point or saying, this is what you have to do. And Jesus has some of these here, and that's what we're going to key in on for our practical instruction. And the first one is watch out so that you are not deceived. That's the number one thing. Be careful so that you're not led astray. And today there are many ways to be led astray. There are people out there claiming they're the Messiah. There's all these new religious movements, especially here in America, where they say, well, actually, that Jesus stuff is fine and your Bible's fine, but God's revealed some more stuff. So come over here and go with us. Even within Christianity, you see a lot of trends and fads. So don't be deceived. Don't let anyone lead you astray. The key here is stick with good old Jesus. Stick with your Bible, the same Bible you've had, and stick with your community. Don't be led astray. The second imperative is do not panic. Do not be troubled. There's going to be rumors of wars and tragedies and calamities. Are we in the birth pains time? Sure. There's all sorts of terrible stuff. And I don't know if it's really a good idea that we have these channels that have news 24/7. I don't know if that's really that great of an idea. Everyday life is stressful enough. We don't need additional burdens. What he's saying with both of these, not that we want to be ignorant to what's going on, but we need some balance. We need to be careful not to be addicted to those little mini heart attacks that the news gives us, little jump starts. Trust in God's care and be still. If we comb this with this, what should I do at the end of times? If we comb this passage and say, okay, well, what should I do? Is there a secret? Is there a place to go? Is there something I should do? You're not going to know when it comes. So just be still and trust. Don't be deceived. Don't run away. Stand your ground. Jesus says, simply trust me. Look at these verses. This is 31. And he will send his angels with a loud trumpet call, and they will gather his elect from the four winds, from one end of the heavens to the other. You see God's promises. This is Psalm 91. He will command his angels concerning you. There's nowhere he can't find you. He can't send his angels to come and get you. This is the second time we've seen an echo of Psalm 91. I read it to Noah this morning. And last week it talked about how Jesus wanted to spread his feathers over Jerusalem and protect it. And that's in Psalm 91 too. Protect me. Cover me with your feathers. Then we see in verse 22, if those days had not been cut short, no one would survive. But for the sake of the elect, those days will be shortened. We see that God is in control and he's caring for us. And then the end of the world will come, but God's promises remain. This is verse 35. Sky and earth will pass away, but my words will never pass away. And so we have these promises. What should we do? Don't be led astray. And don't worry. Don't get over anxious. Just be still and know that God is caring for you. Let's do, Claudia, verses 9 through 14, please.
Then you will be handed over to be persecuted and put to death, and you will be hated by all nations because of me. At that time, many will turn away from the faith and will betray and hate each other, and many false prophets will appear and deceive many people. Because of the increase of wickedness, the love of most will grow cold, but he who stands firm to the end will be saved. And this gospel of the kingdom will be preached in the whole world as a testimony to all nations, and then the end will come.
There's two Well, there's one imperative verb here, and it's to endure. It's hupomeno. It's what Phyllis did with the artwork where she had that little plant sticking out above the ground and then deep, deep roots. When we were doing Sustaining Faith, that was our picture for the year, her work. That's what we're to do. We're to grow roots and stand firm. And then it's not an imperative verb, it's in the future tense, but it says the gospel will be preached to the entire world. And Betsy's gang over at Cru are taking that seriously and doing that. And every generation sees hard times. Every generation can say, why has this happened? Why couldn't this have happened in a different generation? Why has this happened to me? Every person sees rough times. Endure. And then preach the gospel. We have a choice when we hit tough times, and we can become desperate and cowardice and hide in the corner and be self-absorbed. Or we can give someone else hope. We can go out and we can care for someone else, and we can find strength in doing that. We can help others. We can give others hope by preaching the gospel to the ends of the world. Murray and I saw a movie called The Impossible. Has anyone seen that? It was pretty intense. It was a true story about this British family that was vacationing in Thailand right on the beach when the tsunami came in. And then it's just the story of somehow they survived and they found each other, because it was the end of the world. It was their end times. And the first scene after the tsunami, the mother finds the oldest son. It was a couple with 3 boys. And she finds him, and she's hurt. She needs medical assistance, and there's just nobody, and the water's still flowing, and it's just it's a wreck, everything, and they're trying to just survive. And so they found each other, and then they hear this little boy screaming off somewhere. And the mother says, we need to go help him. We need to go find him. And the son says, look, you're hurt really bad. We just need to look after ourselves. And she says, look, if it's the last thing we do, we're going to go help this boy. And so she made that decision not to fall into the desperate corner of self and instead go after someone else. And so they met this boy, and ironically his name was Daniel, who's quoted in this passage, who is the one that always points to the end times, the last prophet, really, Daniel. And so they save Daniel. And you could see that was their strength for the next few days there, that they could care for Daniel. And so you see, in desperate times, in the most desperate of times, it's caring for other people where we can find strength. That was a great message in that movie. This is 15 through 21.
So when you see standing in the holy place the abomination that causes desolation, spoken of through the prophet Daniel, let the reader understand. Then let those who are in Judea flee to the mountains. Let no one on the roof of his house go down to take anything out of the house. Let no one in the field go back to get his cloak. How dreadful it will be in those days for pregnant women and nursing mothers. Pray that your flight will not take place in winter or on the Sabbath, for then there will be great distress, unequaled from the beginning of the world until now, and never to be equaled again.
This seems to apply very directly to that 70 AD invasion by Rome. The best thing to do was to get out of Jerusalem. But this applies to us as well. To me, there are imperative verbs and there's things to do here, and there's ways to apply this to our life. We need to flee the world. We need to flee the comforts that we find. They felt like Jerusalem was a natural defensive city. It was a great place to flee to. But in this case, you were to flee that rock, and you were to go to Jesus. That's what we're to do. We're to flee the world. Don't go back for your possessions. Don't look back for your things. Go. Leave your possessions. And then pray. The things of the world will rise and fall. The big stuff, governments, corporations, organizations, our stuff, bank accounts, homes, clothing. All these things will rise and fall. What we need to do is flee to the rock. We're called to be Noahs in this passage. And we see that in 36 through 39. When you're done with your notes, Claudia, that's fine. She was having a good thought there.
Okay. No one knows about that day or hour, not even the angels in heaven, nor the Son, but only the Father. As it was in the days of Noah, so it will be at the coming of the Son of Man. For in the days before the flood, people were eating and drinking, marrying and giving in marriage, up to the day Noah entered the ark. And they knew nothing about what would happen until the flood came and took them all away. That is how it will be at the coming of the Son of Man.
So we need to be like Noah, having given up everything else and gotten in the car with Jesus. The parable at the end of this is really the main point to me. This is really what Jesus is driving at. And this is 45 through 51.
Who then is the faithful and wise servant, whom the master has put in charge of the servants in his household, to give them their food at the proper time? It will be good for that servant, whose master finds him doing so when he returns. I tell you the truth, he will put him in charge of all his possessions. But suppose that servant is wicked and says to himself, "My master is staying away a long time." And then he begins to beat his fellow servants and to eat and drink with drunkards. The master of that servant will come on a day when he does not expect him, and at an hour he is not aware of. He will cut him to pieces and assign him a place with the hypocrites, where there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth.
Jesus is out of time, and he's telling his disciples, Here is how I want you to care for each other and everyone else. Here's how he's telling us. Here's what I want you to do in the meantime. Care for other people. Do you think there's any coincidence that it's our Bread for the World Sunday, and it says that they need to, the one key thing that's here is give them their food at the proper time? Jesus has appointed some of his servants to be servants to his other servants. There's always people that Jesus has called us to care for. And we as rich Americans need to care for those countries that aren't as lucky as us. We were born into this. We need to send bread for the world. Watching that movie, A Place at the Table, the documentary, Murray and I have realized this in the past couple of years. There's plenty of people on food stamps. At Monarch, there's been people at OCC who could not feed their children without that. We need to give people their food at the proper time. Otherwise, we're wicked servants. We need to care for people. The two instructions here are keep watch, not for your own hide. Keep watch so that you know the secret place to go when the world falls apart and you're safe. That is not the point here. You're not going to even know. What Jesus is saying is keep watch over those people who I've assigned you to keep watch over. And he's not going to burden us beyond what we can bear. In fact, we're going to find that there's a blessing in it, which we all find in ministry. Right, buds? Yeah. In keeping watch over the people that God has called you to watch over, there is much joy and reward. And so that's what we're called to do. We're to keep watch. We're to man our posts and be responsible for the people that God has called us to care for. That's the point.